Now, so the meditations of our hearts be always acceptable unto you, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer.
Amen.
Please be seated. I wonder about this Samaritan who was healed. What do we know about him? We know that he was from Samaria and therefore not a foreigner in Galilee. Know that he was a leper, which means that he had a skin disease. Know that because of that skin disease, he was not allowed to mingle with others. The lepers had to stay apart. Know that he was healed. Can you hear me?
Yes.
That he was healed by Jesus. We know that he then gave thanks to God for his healing. From these little facts, we construct the story of him. And he also constructed a story of his life. I was reading a book the other day, The Zen of Therapy, by a psychotherapist who is also a practitioner of Buddhism, who had this sentence that struck me as profound. We are continually constructing a self out of the raw material of our everyday experience. We are constructing a self out of the raw material of our everyday experience. All 10 of the lepers whom Jesus healed had a life that was affected by having a disease that caused them to be shunned. It must have left a mark on them. One of them also had the experience of being someone who went out of his way to turn back and to give thanks to God in the presence of the one who had healed him. That also became part of the story of his life. Jesus said to him, "Your faith has made you well." Were not all 10 made well? All 10 were healed of their leprosy, but were they all made well? Did they not still carry with them the self of I am a leper? Perhaps when they got to the priest and the priest proclaimed them healed, they then went to the temple and gave thanks. We don't know what happened after this little vignette. Can be healed of an illness and yet not made well. The one who gave thanks was made well by restoring his connection to the other people, to Jesus and to God, by incorporating into his self-identity that he was a person who had been touched by God and made well. Most of us have not had something so dramatic in our lives as being healed by Jesus of a visible skin disease. But we all have been touched by both sorrow, hardships, and grace. In tiny moments, perhaps, and in big things. In death, it takes away someone that we love very dearly. in profound illness that we might not recover from, hardship, perhaps in being isolated from our fellows, being shunned or teased or lonely. None of us make it from birth to death without being affected in some way by sorrow and tragedy. But equally, none of us make it from birth to death without being touched by grace, without encountering the kindness of those close to us and of strangers, without experiencing healing in some way. We shape ourselves, and thus we shape our future by whether we notice, by whether we give thanks, by whether we look for those moments of grace. Fred Rogers is famous for saying that his mother, when he was a child and there were tragic events in the world, told him, look for the helpers, because there are always helpers. I mentioned before the service began that my husband has been ill this week. And we fortunate enough to be able to go to the hospital and encounter a nurse and a doctor who were kind and competent, who gave him the right medicine. But the kindness touched us as much as the competence. You don't know when you are able to summon that kindness. And that must have been hard. I mean, these poor nurses and doctors, the nurse said, we don't have normal anymore. Whatever this is, it's not normal yet. They've been through years of, now we were in something called the overflow ward. Yet she was able to be kind, to take those extra minutes to talk to Steve about what all of the lab things meant that he was curious about. And we were grateful. I have been privileged to visit a lot of people in the hospital over the years of my ministry. And it's interesting. We find what we expect. People who look for kindness, who expect kindness and competence, they find it. And then there are those unfortunate people who have never learned to be grateful, who have never learned to look for the helpers, who are always expecting the worst, expecting to be cheated, expecting to be ignored. And I'm afraid that they also find it. Ourself, the story we tell about ourself shapes our experience. Stories can be from our own experience, or they can be from our culture around us. Think about how many poor young women have had completely wrong ideas about marriage instilled in them by Disney movies. stories become part of our lives. And when the story we can tell ourselves includes those moments of grace, when the story that we tell of ourselves includes our gratitudes for small or large blessings, that shapes ourselves and it shapes our future. In this church, we have a practice that helps us look for gratitudes, look for blessings. This is called a UTO box. And it says on it, notice the good things that happen each day. Give thanks to God for your blessings. Make an offering for each blessing. Your blessings become blessings for others. I'd say you're noticing the blessings become a blessing for you. If you notice that stranger who takes the extra moment to be kind and listen to you, the smile that you get from the checkout clerk, the smile you give to someone else, that little moment where you recognize your mutual humanity and exchange a moment of kindness, that virus which heals. Notice the blessings. Some days, the blessings will outweigh the pain and the suffering. Some days, the suffering seems all-consuming, and you might have to really hunt for some scrap of grace or blessing. Notice it. Put a penny, a quarter, a dime, whatever you have lying around or in your pocket in the UTO box. Say a little prayer of thanks. Now that thou hast given so much to me, give one thing more, a grateful heart, wrote George Herbert. Notice the grace, notice the blessings, and be made well.